All right, episode one of Reflections of a Ritualist. So the kind of format for all this, it'll be more, like I said, reflections, mostly from the heart, unscripted. And so, without further ado, let's just dive right in. So I want to actually talk about what ritualism is, especially within the context of Anglicanism. So first, let's wind the clocks back a little bit. You have the tail end of the Oxford movement in the 1860s, 70s, and 1880s, which was a gradual reintroduction of a more Catholic piety, Catholic beliefs even, into the Church of England and to global Anglicanism in general. So wave one is usually called the Tractarians, which were such figures as John Henry Newman, Edward Pusey, and and various other priests in the Church of England and the Church of Ireland. It was kicked off by a famous sermon preached by Keble called National Apostasy for a Parliament. The gist of that sermon was that Anglicanism has stagnated in its practice, and essentially it was the duty of priests at Oxford to bring back the Catholic faith into Anglicanism. So that was first wave Tractarianism, which was made famous by a series of writings called the Tracts of the Times, hence the name of the Tractarians. Now, this was more of a introduction of beliefs, while remaining mostly loyal to the prayer book. Now, following on the tail of that is the second wave, which is called the Ritualists. Now, that his name implies, they were less focused on Catholic belief and more on Catholic liturgy. Many of these clergy were more bohemian types. You had Percy Dermer, Father Tooth, and even Charles Gore. So what these priests essentially pushed was how to do proper ritual within Anglicanism. But on top of that, there was a theological aspect. I'm going to speak a little bit more about Percy Dermer, who was a famous hymn writer, author. He was a curate, priest, as well as a teacher. So you had a debate at this time among the high churchmen and Anglo-Catholics, more so even among the ritualists, was what is a proper form of liturgy to express the Catholic faith? The two camps was the Italianate camp, which was attempting to reconcile the Book of Common Prayer with essentially the Tridentine Mass. And then you had another camp which sought to introduce a more native English form to Anglicanism via the medieval use of psalm and the uses of York. Actually, even to this day, this can be seen in two missals. The English missal, which is used among more Italianate Anglo-Catholics, and the Anglican missal, which is used by more those who want to promote a more English use. In general, the Ritualist movement sought to push a more native English use via these medieval use of psalm within compliance with the Book of Common Prayer. You have Percy Dermer's, I would call his magnum opus, his Parson's Handbook, which is a textbook that brought the Book of Common Prayer in line with the medieval rubrics of the use of psalm. And So to get further along, why does this matter today? We've moved long past the Tractarians, long past the Ritualist movement. So again, why should this matter today? Well, I would argue, I'm arguing from a stance as an Episcopalian. We currently use the 1979 Book of Common Prayer, which in of itself is decent, despite a lot of the flack it gets. But there is available so-called trial liturgies. One of them is called Enriching Our Worship. Now, I actually went to an Enriching Our Worship service for my Dawson convocation, and without mincing words, it was abysmal. It sought to reconcile the Book of Common Prayer with a liturgy. From what I garnered, the Enriching Our Worship seems to mix and match elements of the Book of Common Prayer, elements of the Roman Mass, and some elements of the Orthodox liturgy. One notable one is the removal of the Filioque in the Nicene Creed. It introduces alternative canticles and attempts to use more so-called gender-neutral language. And there is a bit of a push to make these liturgies more mainstream and essentially slowly undo our heritage. I was actually in an interview with my commissional ministry, and when I was asked about my thoughts on trial liturgies, I was a little too honest. I said, I think these liturgies are really poor experiments, and that we, as faithful Anglicans, should keep to the prayer books. So, I really do think that was a reason why I got put on hold, if we're going to venture that far. That's besides the point. So my thoughts are that I think if the Episcopal Church is going to try and shoehorn Enriching Our Worship, and by extension the Church of England wants to shoehorn common worship, we're going to eventually lose ourselves. We're going to lose our very heritage as Anglicans. And I really think we should look to the works of these men and tackle liturgical atrocities like Enriching Our Worship. And a lot of these men went to prison. The Reverend Arthur Tooth was imprisoned for his ritualistic style at his parish. There's actually an infamous cover from Vanity Fair that shows him in prison as he was depicted to be a modern martyr. And I think we, especially those of us who are more high church Anglo-Catholic types, do continue to face stigma amongst more evangelical, broad type, liberal types who want to try and uproot our very identity. Now, again, to be clear, I don't identify as liberal nor conservative, nor traditionalist, or whatever false dichotomy camp you want to try and impose on values. But I would certainly call myself hardcore with ritual, in that people are going to try and undo our church from within. And one of the ways is liturgical travesties. We really should take to heart their struggle and model it in our lives. Obviously, we should pray to God that we should be given the strength to endure such as just liturgical abuses, and never ever lose faith, and that the Holy Spirit will always move within her church, even if it goes off the deep end. The church will always be the church. But it is still our duty to correct and hold accountable those within the church. All right, that concludes this really, really short introduction to this. I do hope to make more videos of it. Thank you for tuning in. God bless.